invite your attention tonight to the book of 1 Kings. We'll be in 1 Kings just a moment, then we'll go over to the book of 2 Kings. So keep your place there. We're going to be in 1 Kings tonight just briefly. The title of the message tonight is A Prophet in Waiting. So it's good to see this crowd. I think we had the same amount we did in Sunday school this morning, and we had some that are here tonight that wasn't here this morning, and some that are not here. So glad you're here. Good to have a good crowd here tonight. And this will be the next to last message in the last message from here. I'll have Friday night. I'll wind it all up at the stick meeting. So there's still a roar coming through this thing, Brian. If you can turn down or something. 1 Kings chapter 19, beginning with verse 19. And so he departed thence and found Elisha, the son of Shaphat, who was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen before him, and he with the 12th. And Elijah passed by him and cast his mantle upon him. And he left the oxen and ran after Elijah and said, Let me, I pray thee, kiss my father and my mother, and then I will follow thee. And he said unto him, Go back again, for what have I done to thee? And he returned back from him and took a yoke of oxen and slew them and boiled their flesh with the instruments of the oxen and gave unto the people, and they did eat. Then he arose and went after Elijah and ministered unto him. One of the most popular ideas of college football coaches today is a coach in waiting. How many of you heard that term? College football coach in waiting. And I've entitled this tonight, A Prophet in Waiting tonight. And a coach who is successful gets a guy who is a coach, and he pours all his knowledge into this guy, and he's hired on with the idea that one day when this coach retires, this coach in waiting will take over the team, and he will carry the team over, and everything will just be smooth. And a lot of those times that didn't work out so good. I think Texas, their coach wound up leaving, and he come from one place and he wound up leaving, so it didn't work out. But when Elijah felt like he was the Lone Ranger after the Mount Carmel experience, remember he ran and he went to the Negev desert, and he hid under a juniper there, and the Lord said, What are you doing here? Elijah thought he was the only one who hadn't succumbed to idol worship, but God was already working in a man's heart to take over once Elijah had finished, and his name was Elisha. And his name means God is salvation. So God was going to continue his work on through the life of Elisha. Elijah had done all and served God for the past about 27 to 30 years. I was doing the math on that this week and trying to figure out how long it was his ministry before he got translated, and about 27 years when at this point in time. And Elijah had done all that God asked him to do. And sometimes, though, God calls his servants to other places, and sometimes he calls them home. And God knew that Elijah was getting tired and that he needed someone to replace him eventually. So that we see here that as Elijah is going along, he goes to Abel Meholah. Abel, A-B-E-L, M-E-H-O-L-A-H. And this was a place of calling. And Abel Meholah was a place where a wealthy landowner named Shaphat lived. And Shaphat was probably had a lot of farmland there. And his son was Elisha. And Elisha was plowing 12 yoke of oxen. Think about that for a minute. 12 yoke of oxen. And when he's approached by this guy, we looked at this hairy guy with this mantle, his dad was saying after church today, probably if Elijah came up to us, we'd probably be scared of him, And I told him it was ironic that Elijah was a man who had a lot of hair and Elisha was bald. So, but God calls all kind of people to him. And when he's approached by this guy takes off his mantle, which is an outer garment, and he places it on the shoulders of Elisha. Now, what in the world did that mean? Well, it meant that he was going to be taken over eventually. And you'll have to hear more about that a little bit Friday night. But Elisha knew that this was a big deal. Here was God's man, Elijah, the prophet Elijah, who defeated the prophets of Baal, who he had heard about, who he had heard stories about what he had done. And he takes his mantle off, signifying that he would be the replacement. Elisha stood there in awe, and all of a sudden he begins to run. And he goes home. He said, I got to go kiss my mother and my father. And he leaves his oxen right there and ran to the house to tell them goodbye. And then he and Elijah go back. They sacrifice 2 oxen. That's a big deal. To sacrifice 2 oxen, they eat. And then Elisha is ready to follow and learn from Elijah. Actually, God knew not only that did Elijah need to be training a replacement, but he knew that Elijah needed a friend, a companion, someone to encourage him. You know, I've learned in mission work over the last 13 years, it's better to go as a team. It's better to have a mission team, and that works really good. You know, worked in the Bible, worked in the book of Acts, and so Elijah needed some. And Elisha's faith is amazing, and his willingness is refreshing, and his desire to serve us is a blessing. So this is the guy that he calls. Now I want you to go with me to 2 Kings chapter 2, and let's pick it up. 2 Kings chapter 2. How long, and I'm going to share this with the guys on Friday, how long did Elijah have him with him? Look it up, best I can figure, about 7 or 8 years. About 7 or 8 years he followed, Elisha followed Elijah around for about that time. Okay, and then what we're going to be reading in 2 Kings chapter 2 and verse 1 is going to be like the last of his life. Basically the last day of his life. And we're going to look at here in verse 1, it said, It came to pass when the Lord would take up Elijah into heaven by a whirlwind, that Elijah went with Elisha from Gilgal. And Elijah said unto Elisha, Tarry here, I pray thee, for the Lord hath sent me to Bethel. And Elisha said unto him, As the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. So they went down to Bethel. And the sons of the prophets that were at Bethel came forth to Elisha, and said unto him, Knowest thou that the Lord will take away thy master from thy head today? And he said, Yea, I know it. Hold ye your peace. And Elijah said unto him, Elisha, tarry here, I pray thee, for the Lord hath sent me to Jericho. And he said, As the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. So they came to Jericho. And the sons of the prophets that were at Jericho came to Elisha, and said unto him, Knowest thou that the Lord will take away thy master from thy head today? And he answered, Yea, I know it. Hold your peace. And Elijah said unto him, Tarry, I pray thee here, for the Lord hath sent me to Jordan. And he said, As the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. And he went on. The two went on. And 50 of the sons of the prophets went and stood to view afar off, and they stood by the Jordan. And Elijah took his mantle and wrapped it together and smote the waters, that they were divided hither and thither, so that they went over on dry ground. And it came to pass when they were gone over, that Elijah said unto Elisha, Ask what I shall do for thee before I be taken from thee. And Elisha said, I pray thee, a double portion of thy spirit be upon me. And he said, Thou hast asked a hard thing. Nevertheless, if thou see me when I am taken up from thee, it shall be so unto thee. But if not, it shall not be so. And it came to pass, as they still went on and talked, that behold, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire, and parted them both asunder, and Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. This is the last day of Elijah's life, the last part of his life, rather. And as he gets to these last days of his life, we see some reflections of his life, some places. He's going to go to some places, and these places are important. These places are important places of history in the Israelites' history, and also some in his life. So the first place that he goes is to Gilgal, a place of beginnings. As heaven's light begins to dawn in Elijah's life, he thinks through the glimpses of eternity that have shaped him into the vessel of honor that he is for God. And his journey to heaven begins at Gilgal, a historic place of beginnings for Israel. It was here that this infant nation took its first steps, as you'll learn in Joshua chapter 4, that it was here the first steps that they took into the promised land. So it was a place of beginnings, and it was a place of security and safety for Israel, a place that they could go back to and just find comfort in going back to that place. There are some places that you and I go to in our life. If you were told that you have just a week or two to live, you'll probably go back to some of those places that are special to you. You go back to maybe a place you live, maybe a place where your kids were born, maybe places that were special in your life. And we too have beginnings in the life of Christ. Here we are nurtured by the Father's love. We become secure. Here we gain strength by getting into the Word of God and by learning to pray and realizing the importance of God. So we've had those Gilgal places in our life where we have learned those things, where we have begun to grow, and God has worked in our life, and we set the beginnings of our spiritual life to grow in Christ. So we've had those. The second place, and he said, I'm going here alone, to Gilgal, and Elisha said, no, I'm going with you. So he said, well, you stay here, and he said, I'm going with you. You notice one thing about every one of these things, that Elijah didn't go to these places just because he wanted to go. Did you notice that? It says, notice what it said, and it says, the Lord has sent me. Remember we talked about this morning, whenever Elijah did anything, it was where the Lord called him to do it. And so the Lord called him to these places. Why do you think the Lord called him to these places? I think he wanted him to reflect on, hey, there have been people that have served God. Elijah, you have not been alone. You've not been in this by yourself. So second place that he went to is Bethel, was a place of altar. And he got there, and of course he tells Elisha to stay there, but he says, I'm not staying there, I'm going with you. And, Elisha was sticking close to Elijah, desiring to know more, that he could get everything that he could from him, because he knew that his time was limited. And Elijah, before his time was up, he wanted to get that. So he walked with him the 15 miles, and they got to Bethel. There they're met by there was a seminary there, met by some of the Israel seminarians, who reminded Elisha of the significance of this time. He's going to be leaving. I know that. That'd be hard. That'd be hard to know that here's this guy who put 7-8 years in your life, who's taught you things, and his time's limited. He's going to be leaving. And they asked Elisha, do you know that the Lord is going to take him? And he said, yes. He said, I want you to just be quiet, be still. And he walks through the place there, and he thinks, probably contemplating on the place at Bethel, where Abraham and Jacob had erected altars to the Lord in Genesis 12 and Genesis 28. Surely Elijah's thoughts must have wandered to his own altars that he had in his life when he thought back about to the brook Cherith. I remember this place where the Lord took me, where the ravens fed me. At the widow's kitchen table, when she said, I don't have enough to eat, and I'm making a cake, and we're going home, and me and my son are going to make a cake, and we're going to die. And he saw the Lord work at that place, and a great place of sacrifice. And then the spare room that she had, and she loaned him that spare room. We called it a prophet's room. When I told people we were putting a prophet's room in the church, they said, what in the world is that? Now you know. It was a room that was, if you're a preacher's kid, you know what that is, don't you? You know what a prophet's room is. It means a room where the preachers come and stay. But she made one there for him to stay, and it was there that her son was brought back to life. And so these are places in our life, that painful places, but places of great meaning in our life. Our Bethels speak of the sacrifice and the hurt. And these are places where we're forced to surrender to God. You remember there was Jacob wrestled with an angel all night. Things that are precious to us. Listen, maybe a loved one taken from us. Maybe unrealized dreams. Maybe the loss of a job or a relationship. Maybe sickness and helplessness. And things happen there. And it's at this altar where we resolve that, hey, I'm going to fully trust God. Because, see, those things that we think are so terrible in our life, they make us look to God. And it's there of sacrifice. So he goes to this place of Bethel. And it's not the last place he goes to. We find that they move on. Again, Elijah tells Elisha, tarry you here while I go to Jericho. And Elisha says, no, I'm going with you. Isn't it great to have a friend to go with you? Somebody just to be there with you, somebody to accompany you along the way. And so he goes to Jericho. Jericho is a place of battle. In verse 4 it says, and Elijah said unto Elisha, tarry you here, I pray thee. And the Lord, he had sent me to Jericho, and he said, as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. So he came to Jericho. And the sons of the prophets came out there, Elisha, do you know he's going to take him away? He said, I know. He said, hold your peace. Okay? He didn't want it to be about him. He didn't want the spotlight. Elisha didn't want the spotlight on him. This is Elijah's time. This is his time. This is when God is preparing him. And so he goes to Jericho. Elisha remains faithfully by his side. And as they come into this place, he thinks about what happened here. He recalls Joshua's bold leadership. He recalls the blast of the ram's horn, the shofar. The walls of this mighty city now lay in ruins. We got to go to Jericho about a little over 20 years ago. And trust me, there are no walls. They're gone. And he said, whoever would try to lay that city back would lose his firstborn son. And it happened. He tried, and that did happen. And it's recorded in the Bible. But you listen, he come back to this place. Elijah can retrace the battles in his life. Listen, he's had some battles. He's battled more. He had a continual battle with Ahab and his wicked queen wife Jezebel. With the prophets of Baal and his battle of Mount Carmel, showing God's power. Or with Ahaziah, as we looked at this morning. Ahaziah was King Ahab's son that we looked at this morning. And he tried to send guys up there to tell him to come down. And Elijah got fire down on him and burned him up. He remembers these. He's been through some battles. Listen, if you're going to serve God, you're going to go through some battles. You're going to go through those times when those Jerichos in your life, when you're going to be fighting some battles. Maybe sometimes in your teenage years. Maybe you wrestle with some emotional or mental or spiritual issues. And wherever your battleground, you learn like Elijah that without the Lord's help, the battle is lost. We have to rely on the Lord. Elijah has done that. He didn't say, I'm going to show these prophets of Baal. He just said, look what a mighty God we have. I'm going to serve God. And then, after one last look, Elijah turns to his final earthly destination, the Jordan. The Jordan, a place of death. We sing a lot of songs about the crossing of the Jordan. Stood for death. And we went to Israel. The Jordan River is not very wide. It's not as wide as this room. It's only probably about half as wide as this room. But at the flood stage, it was very dangerous. He got up, and we know about flood stages right now. So when he got up, it was very. So it had the idea of death. When the Lord asked him to go there and the priest had to step in, and as soon as they stepped in, the waters parted. They had to have the faith, okay, to step in there. But we find that they go to Jordan in verses 6 and 7. They go to Jordan, and again, still determined to allow Elisha a choice. Elijah says, Elisha, stay here because the Lord has sent me to the Jordan. And he said, I'm going with you. I'm here for the long haul. I'm here to the end. And Elisha is right there. He accompanies Elijah. The sons of the prophets, they knew that this was going to be the last time that they would see Elijah. That there's 50 of them, and they're standing on the banks of the other banks of the river silently, inspectively. They're probably up on their tiptoes looking to see what's going to happen. What's going to happen to these two guys? They knew it was going to happen. God somehow had let them know, and they're prophets. They knew. So these two, Elijah and Elisha, approach the Jordan, and Elijah lingers over the shadows of death that passed over his life. He remembers the flight into the Negev desert. Remember what he asked there? Lord, just let me die. Listen, God never answered that prayer. He felt hopelessly gripped by depression as he despaired of life. But now at the Jordan, listen, he shakes his head and he marvels at how his life has been spared and how that he had to die to selfishness to live for the Lord. And listen, our Jordans are like that too. Well, only we face a Jordan that Elijah never faced. We're going to face death. He didn't die. See, he prayed to die, but he didn't die. The Lord took him. Translated, took him up to the whirlwind. Elijah never did physically die, that we know. Some of us or some people that we know have gone to Jordan's edge, and some of us may be ready to cross over. I don't know. We don't know. Most of us have had someone, grandparents, parents, maybe a child, maybe a loved one, maybe a friend who has journeyed on before us. And they went to this land. Now he too is at the last step on his journey. And as the Jordan River flows effortlessly past him, he removes his outer garment and he slaps the water and the Jordan parts. Verses 8 through 12, we see separation. These are words of departure. Can't you almost hear these 50 prophets gasp as they stand on their tippy toes wanting to see what's going to happen for a better view? Elijah parts the river, and once on the other side, Elijah desires to reward his faithful servant Elisha. For the past 7 or 8 years, Elisha has faithfully followed. He's the guy who, when he said, come, he left it all and he went and he followed. He knew what a special calling this was. He knew what a special man that Elijah was. He could see it. He watched him in his life. And here he's about to leave. Elisha has faithfully followed. He has learned from his master. He is fully aware of God's need to continue this work on. The work that Elijah has started needs to be carried on. But it must go on. It must go on without Elijah, because God has done it. So he asked Elijah. He said, Elijah asked him, what can I do? He said, would you grant me this one thing? Would you give me a double portion of your spirit? See, he could have had all kinds of stuff, but he asked for spiritual things. He asked for a double portion. And basically, Elijah says, that's the big order. It's not really mine to give. But he said, I tell you what. He said, if you see me when I'm taken up, you'll know that it happened. Elisha's plan of how God can use him is unlimited. So Elijah thoughtfully processes this request. And, Elisha has been inseparable from Elijah. He's not about to leave him now. So Elijah says, well, if you see me, that will happen. Verse 11, then Elijah went up in a whirlwind to heaven. The chariot comes right between them as they walk. They didn't stop. They didn't look up. This as they walked. Listen, it happened. And he saw him no more. He saw it happen. He took hold of his own clothes. Elisha did, and he rent them. Elisha had just lost the dearest friend that he had. But while Elisha's ministry was over, Elisha's is just about to begin. Some things I want to share with you in closing tonight. An application of this message is, listen, the work of God goes on with us or without us. With us or without us. And a good leader, listen, a good leader prepares the work to go on without them. You see churches all the time, when the pastor leaves, the church folds. That shouldn't happen. That don't need to happen. And listen, we need to understand that none of us are God's special person that He can't do without. Because He's got somebody else that can replace us, that can do our job. And you know what? He wants the work to go on. Isn't that what we train our kids to do? Isn't that why we raise our kids? We raise our kids to be an extension to keep going on, to keep serving, to keep living for God, to keep doing God's will. Okay? They're not just there to get a tax deduction. Listen, they're there for you to use them for God's honor and glory. Okay? And to bring them up in the nurture of admonition of the Lord. I want to share with you some things about your life. First of all, live your life so that there are no regrets. Elijah lived his life with no regrets. You don't know how many people I've counseled. That's the biggest thing. I wish I had done this. I wish I'd made things right sooner. I wish I had served God. I wish I had come to Christ. They live their life. Listen, don't live your life so that there are no regrets. That you can say, well, I've served God and I want to live my life that way. Listen, young people, you have a great opportunity before you to do that. To live all of your life and serve God from your youth up. As Psalmist said, remember thy Creator in the days of thy youth. So live your life with no regrets. Second of all, live your life so that you can hear the Lord say, well done. Well done. Listen, you may think that life is measured by how many people come to your funeral. Well, listen, you won't be there to enjoy it, so don't worry about that. Or your wealth, listen, you're going to leave everything behind. Or you make a name for yourself. Listen, the only thing that should matter is to hear Him say, well done, thy good and faithful servant. We need to live our life so that we can hear Him say, well done. You know, the older I get, the less I care about what people think about me. We want to wear tall socks, we do it, don't we? We do. All right? Listen, as we serve God, listen, it doesn't matter what, you can ask me about that later. Listen, the more we serve God, this is all noise out here. As long as I please God, this is noise. Okay? Serve God. You can hear Him say, well done. Live your life, thirdly, so that others around you will be turned to God. That's a mark of a life. That those around you will be turned to God. They will desire to serve God. They will desire to live for God, including our own family. Our own family. See, I've known guys who've been tremendous in the ministry. They've won hundreds and hundreds of people to Christ, and they lost their own family. What a shame. Live your life so that others around you will be turned to God. And then, fourthly, live your life for God until you die. Listen, don't get to the latter part of your life and say, well, I'm going to put it on cruise control. Live your life until you die. We don't know when we're going to die. Listen, if we sit around waiting for the clock of death, we're not going to get anything done. That's not our department. That's management. We're just sales, okay? That's the Lord. Listen, He calls that. He says when our life's over, we don't know. But live your life for God until the day you die. Elijah did these things in his life, and he served God with all that he had and all the fervor that he had, and he's about to pass on the mantle. And all he can do is pray that Elisha takes it up. Takes up the mantle and goes. Listen, live your life in that manner, in that fashion. Now, as we close in prayer, your invitation around, we're going to have a prayer in just a moment, but listen, what's keeping you from living that kind of life? What's keeping you and I from living that sort of life in Christ? Something holding us back? Listen, live your life. You only get one time. How many days do we get? You don't know. But if I'm given today, I need to live today. My dad got cancer about a little over 7 years ago. My dad tried to stop living. He was alive, but he wasn't living. I said, Dad, you got one day, I got one day. That's all we get. You can't worry over the days you don't have. It's been 7 years. 7 years. Listen, God can take our life and He can honor it. And if He gives us 10 years or 15, or if He takes one of these young people, then live your life for that many years and serve Him. So that you can say, you can hear, well done, my good and faithful servant. And listen, we've lost people in our church over the last few years. The further we go, we're going to lose more people in our church. I don't like to lose people. It's just a part of life. Listen, others have to pick up and go on. Pick up and keep serving. Why did God leave you here? God left you here to pick up and keep going. Keep serving. Keep living. Keep doing for more. As we stand tonight, as we pray, Father, we thank you.